Hello, everyone. Australia Day 2024 honours has just been announced, and being recognised with an AM is Her Excellency Ms. Harinder Sidhu. We, of course, know her as Australia's former High Commissioner to India, but she is currently the High Commissioner to New Zealand and has also served in Cairo, Damascus, and Moscow. Welcome to Indian Link, Your Excellency. Congratulations on your recognition.
Thank you very much, Pawan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be able to talk to you all.
So how do you feel at this latest honour?
You know, I often hear people say they feel humble, and now I know what that really means. That is my first overwhelming feeling. It's humbled in two ways. One is that I really look around me and recognise that I'm surrounded by so many people who are worthy of recognition. So, you know, the great privilege and honour of this recognition has not lost on me. But the second thing is also to recognise that I'm sure that, you know, the sorts of things people have in mind that I'm being honoured for, I never really did alone. So, you know, you don't achieve anything on your own. You do it by standing on the shoulders of giants with the support of people around you. It's genuinely a team effort who you become. And I guess for me particularly, that goes back to my family and my mother and father as being my most foundational support. So I have all those things going on in my mind at the moment. I feel very, very happy, but of course very honoured and deeply, deeply humbled by it.
So you mentioned your family. Let's go back to the very beginning. You applied for the highly competitive graduate program with the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1987. 3,000 applicants and you were one of the 25 who were admitted to the scheme. That's a success rate of less than 1%. Now, you've been quoted as saying your father was completely gobsmacked that Australia would take somebody like you who arrived in this country as a 10-year-old, who went to the local school, not a flash private school, who had no elite connections, yet became an elite diplomat. And yet, you've risen to the top of your profession and being decorated for it. What has been your family's reaction today to your AM?
Well, they are very, very proud. You know, when I joined the Foreign Service, as you rightly say, it really confirmed in my father's mind that Australia is a meritocracy, that actually you don't have to have privilege or connections to join the Foreign Service. You just have to be very good and you have to be able to work hard and get there. And that's always been his ethos. And so both my mother and father are very delighted, but somehow with my father, he always believed I could achieve anything, so he's sort of not surprised. But it's lovely to feel that they constantly tell me how proud they are of me, and that means a lot.
Wonderful. And what about your children? Do they look at the halo around her head, or is it still good old mum?
Oh, look, I think you're always just mum, really. Although I have one daughter and she is very, very happy for me.
Your Excellency, Foreign Minister Penny Wong said recently, and I quote, "We can go to most parts of the world and say, we are you, we look like you, we are like you, because somewhere in Australia, there's someone who's connected to that country." Now, during your posting to India as High Commissioner from 2016 till 2020, how did being an Australian Indian play into that narrative?
Yeah, look, there's nothing more accurate in what Minister Wong says than that in terms of my own experience. And I've spoken about this before. The ability to look at the world through the eyes of Indians and to see and to understand how India comes into the world and how it sees its place in the world is really, that's the job of a diplomat. But it's so much easier, and it became so much more intuitive when I was here, because I realized that through my upbringing and my cultural background, it was very much easier to make those connections and to come to that, to understand how India looked at the world and to explain that back to Australia, because, of course, I speak both languages in that sense. Mm-hmm. And it's a tremendous asset. And we have, you know, as a Foreign Affairs Department, really actively tried to use the asset, which is our population, in terms of people we post overseas as ambassadors. So it has been absolutely true that I think, my great effectiveness in India was in large part due to my ability to make that connection. But not just that. One thing else I spoke about was the fact that most people in Australia of whatever background, but particularly if they've grown up in migrant communities, have learned the art of cultural interpretation. Mm-hmm. And that is so much of what we do here as well. Mm-hmm. Our job as diplomats is to take Australia to the world. And that's not just what we stand for, but it's also who we are. And I think that's a really important thing.
True. Your Excellency, obviously you went to India at the time when the relationship between India and Australia was warming up. You were there from 2016 till 2020. 2014 was the first time when Prime Minister Modi came to Australia. And there was thawing of the relationship, which was in a bit of a freeze for a few years prior to that. Now, can you share what you consider are your two professional and personal highlights of your tenure in India?
Wow, there's a lot there. Well, look, I think my professional highlights was, in fact, the whole job of raising the India-Australia relationship. It built layer upon layer. I was working very closely with our folk in Canberra and people in Delhi to really elevate the relationship to what I called a first-tier relationship. And that was something that we articulated in the Australian Foreign Policy White Paper in 2017. And it culminated in the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which we then agreed soon after my departure in 2020. So that was, really a shift in the way and the stature of the relationship. Along the way, India joined the Quad, as did Australia. We deepened our strategic relationship. And of course, all those underpinnings led to, certainly after my departure, the conclusion of an early harvest free trade agreement. So the shift in our relationship with India is something I feel very satisfied by and feel very honoured to have been a part of. My personal highlight was taking my father to his birth village in Punjab, in Dharampur. There was a moment, we were greeted with all the fanfare that you expect of Punjabi, and it was wonderful, and it was so meaningful for my father because he was getting older and he knew he wouldn't have perhaps another chance to go back. But there was this wonderful moment where this old man, my father's in his 80s now, came up to my father and these two men hugged each other and were saying things like, "You haven't changed a bit." And it turned out that this fellow was my dad's school friend as a child in Punjab.
Oh, amazing.
So it was very touching. It was a wonderful moment.
No, I can well imagine. Ms. Sidhu, just coming back to foreign policy, and you've been a diplomat now for about 37 years. You were there when Russia opened up under the Glasnost reforms, when the 9/11 attacks took place, when the Middle East changed with the fall of Saddam Hussein. And now the world is seeing the rise of China and the growth of young India. We're grappling with violent conflicts, security threats, energy shocks. The world is becoming less benign. What do you see as challenges for current day diplomats and Australian diplomats in particular?
I think the challenge is how we manage competing challenges, the competing forces in the world at the moment. And diplomats need to constantly keep an eye on their national interest as they weave their way through all these challenges. The issue is that the challenges are becoming more diverse and more amorphous. It is not as straightforward as the kind of exercise of hard power that we have seen. We are seeing much more exercise of influence and much more of an exercise of soft power in the interest of hard power. We're having to learn new methods and new ways of conducting diplomacy. There's a lot more public-facing work that diplomats have to do because we have to bring our publics along with us. And we need to deal with a wider cross-section of the community rather than just government-to-government relations. So there's been a big learning curve. The pace at which things are happening is very quick. Decisions have to be made quickly. And, the risks of getting things wrong can be quite high. It's perhaps no more challenging time to be a diplomat than now. And certainly over the period I've seen, the challenges are coming thick and fast.
Right. No, I can understand what you're saying. But for a young migrant who will be listening to this interview, what would be your advice about settling and succeeding in a new country?
Yeah, I talked about being able to be a bit bilingual and speaking both cultures.
How many languages, Your Excellency?
Oh,
Hindi,
don't even go there.
Punjabi, English?
Yeah, a few. But it's about really understanding. You're Australian first as a diplomat. You always are, and you can never lose sight of that. And you have to recognise that your cultural background is valuable. It's important. It will help you. But you do need to always put Australia first in your role. And that is, and so understanding Australia, understanding how we think, what we care about, what our values are in the world, that's very important to learn and to be able to project, because that's what we do every single day.
In an interview, you have said, I have two strings to my bow in everything I do. If you had not become
Which interview was that?
University of Sydney, 2017, and I can quote the date.
You've done your research. You've done your research.
Now, you said, I have two strings to my bow in everything I do. If you had not become a diplomat, where do you think your skill set would have taken you?
So you're going to laugh. I wanted to be a history teacher. I have a
I can
passion.
see that. I would say, if somebody had asked me a week ago saying, what would Your Excellency Harinder Sidhu like to be if she was not a diplomat? I would have said a history teacher.
Yeah, I would have loved. I mean, I trained as a lawyer, I have to say. I trained in law, but actually I have a real fascination for history. And here's the thing about being a diplomat. You're at the coalface of history. You mentioned all those things I have lived through in my career. I have witnessed history unfold in front of me. I've had the enormous privilege of being able to do that. So in some way, I'm indulging my passion for history and politics and the way the world works. It's been a source of constant fascination for me.
So if you had to write a book, what would be the name of that book, Your Excellency?
Oh, goodness. Can't think. What would be the name of a book? Oh, goodness me. I can't think.
About your real life experiences from as you said, being on the cutting edge of history being created?
Yeah, I think so. It'd be, a view on the world. It would be how your personal experience will always colour how you see things. That's the interesting thing about historical accounts, is that everybody will see things a little bit differently.
Comes from their own perspective. History writes itself. And before I conclude, Your Excellency, there was a recent World Cup cricket final between Australia and India. Did you have the celebratory lamingtons in your fridge, or was it gajar ka halwa?
Oh, lamingtons for sure.
Your Excellency, Harinder Sidhu AM, congratulations again, and thank you for joining us on Indian Link.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, Pawan.